All right, so let's move on with the reading. I'll just set a timer again, 30 minutes. And here we go. So let me just find where I left off. So he has this big quote, I guess, from his previous article. Yeah, I remember this. Depressed people experience a slower world. Yeah. Brittle. Yep, I remember talking about that. This part right here of this sentence, the first half, it's like if you're imagining external as opposed to internal things that you're avoiding. If there are all these different like external situations in your immediate environment that you're constantly avoiding, in some ways it allows me to understand or imagine and think about that more clearly, because it's like, holy shit, if I'm constantly avoiding like bumping into that person or bumping into that person or getting into this kind of conversation with somebody, or running into a certain person in a particular place or whatever, like all these different things, if there's all these different things around you that you're trying to avoid, you're going to put so much energy into that, right? So much thought and effort, both conscious and unconscious or subconscious, is going to be spent on just avoiding, monitoring and avoiding. And also how limiting that is, if you are avoiding all of these potential situations around you in your immediate environment with the people who are around you, it really limits the scope of what you can actually do and where you can be and who you can be with. So yeah, there's those two main points. It's just, if you're constantly avoiding those kinds of things, it drains the hell out of you mentally and emotionally and physically. And then two, it radically limits your scope of life and what you can do. So I think externalizing it helps understand it a little better and visualize it a bit better. But ultimately, in this context, we're talking about internal stuff. Thoughts, feelings, memories. If you're avoiding all of these kinds of things internally, then the same thing that I just described happening externally is going to be happening internally. And so your scope of life and what you can explore and what you can do and what you can think about and what you can feel is going to be so limited, because you're trying to avoid all of these things on the inside. And you're similarly going to be drained, because it takes a lot of effort and energy and thought to avoid those things, even though they're inside. Vigilance, yeah. Right, like even just this thing where he says, Photoshop your consciousness to make everything acceptable. Like, in a very mundane way, it's like you took a picture, but you're not happy with the picture. And so you have to spend this effort and time and thought photoshopping the picture. And maybe you're really good at Photoshop, because you practiced for your whole life. And so it doesn't always take that much time or effort to do the Photoshop, but nonetheless, you are spending time on it, right? You're spending time on covering up the reality because you can't handle the reality. So maybe you're so practiced at hiding and avoiding from all these parts of yourself that maybe it doesn't take that much energy anymore. But what's still the case is that you can't handle the actual reality. You can't handle the picture without photoshopping it. Okay, so moving on. Okay, yeah, I remember this paragraph as well. But I think it's also important to remember that, so looking at this sentence, it's important to remember that we put those filters on for good reason. We do it in order to function and remain able to like move through our life, right? Because to bear or to face just like the raw reality of it, to face the different parts of ourselves that are unpleasant, or to face these very situations, or just the unphotoshopped photo is too painful, and so we put that filter on. And so I think, yeah, all I'm saying is it should be remembered that those filters are there for a reason, and if you simply take them away, that doesn't suddenly make you capable of dealing with the reality. Something else has to occur. So, all right, moving on. What's coming to mind is Steve Jobs, actually, and his whole approach to marketing, where this is going to be a total paraphrase, but, he didn't really care about asking people what they wanted, because he felt like people don't really know what they want until they see it, and until it's right in front of them. And I guess Henry Ford, similarly, right? No one asked for the car. If he asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses, or whoever it was that said that. Yeah, right? That's like a quote about the whole Model T, or whatever, that car. Anyway, I'm reminded of that, where like existential kink and going through that process showed him something that he couldn't have even imagined. But then once he was confronted with, once he had the experience, then it was like, oh shit, I want that. Yeah, that's it. Okay, this seems like it'll be a very interesting paragraph. caveating himself, right? Hedging the promise again, which I really appreciate. Not over-promising. I don't think that other people will have as dramatic and instant results as I did. Paraphrasing him. He had an unusual relationship with his self-image. What is he talking about here? What are these essays? I want to know what those are, just because I'm curious if he's saying that this memoir that he wrote it as part of a book deal, and that book deal was offered to him because of some essays that he'd written. So what are those essays? I want to know. They're clearly good. But anyway, the point being, I was very self-aware. Yeah. He'd examined himself a lot. Entertaining self-deprecation. This reminds me of like the first post I ever made on my website, where I talked about going to a sort of group therapy workshop, and everyone was asked. It was like mostly guys, and everyone was asked to go to the front of the room one at a time and share something vulnerable. And how I was kind of disappointed and taken aback that it didn't seem that anyone was really being vulnerable, or like a very select few seemed to be genuinely vulnerable. A lot of them seemed to just be like cracking jokes about themselves, like, oh, aren't I silly? Aren't I dumb? Isn't this crazy? Can you believe that I got myself into this situation? But it didn't seem vulnerable. It seemed almost like invulnerable in that respect, because they were like hiding behind the joke. So I don't know that Sasha's necessarily saying that he did that, but maybe he is. It reminds me of it anyway. Understanding of self, that was partially a coping mechanism. It's funny that he uses that term, because I literally just spent the last hour thinking about coping mechanisms and my own coping mechanisms, and what things are coping mechanisms, and what things are actually sort of helping me move through various traumas. So yeah, I've just spent a fucking hour thinking about this really in depth. It's an interesting thing to consider how an understanding of oneself, right, like an idea, can be a coping mechanism, because the idea allows you to avoid confronting the raw reality of things. It allows you to write off an experience, or explain it away, or not see the nuances of it, which actually are painful to you if you were to confront them. Which is maybe not so helpful, but at the same time, I think I would actually gravitate to saying that it's essential, as long as you use it for what it's worth. Because maybe you really do need that coping mechanism, because you don't have the skill or the resources otherwise to deal with that thing that your coping mechanism is helping you cope with. If you don't have the capacity to deal with that thing, then you need the coping mechanism, right? But what the coping mechanism provides for you is time with a little bit more peace of mind to develop that capacity so that you need the coping mechanism less. So like, I don't know that this is the best example, but I think, Stoicism can kind of be that as just one example of like a intellectual framework that can serve as a coping mechanism, because it allows you to like frame your understanding of like emotions and yourself and your relationship to other people and your responsibility for things. It gives you a very strong and clear framework to understand and make sense of your life. And so you don't have to deal with certain things. You can explain away certain experiences so that you don't have to deal with the pain that would come from just like sitting with it, Like maybe you are scared, but Stoicism would be like, that's not within your control, so don't worry about it. And so you can be like, okay, well, I'm not going to worry about it. But that doesn't stop or change the fact that if you actually were to like spend time with that fear, you really would be scared, So that's what I mean when I say that Stoicism, or something like it, intellectual frameworks in that way, can be coping mechanisms, because they allow you to not have to really feel the reality of your situation, or certain aspects of your situation. Anyway, I like this ending here. This whole paragraph, right? So he introduces it by hedging his promise, right? I don't think that everyone will have as big or fast results as mine because blah, 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 blah. But then again, maybe everyone does do this stuff that I just said about me that I think is unique. So it's like, this probably won't work for you as it did for me, but maybe you're like me, actually. And so your results will probably vary. Wow, such a hedge sentence, but I think worth saying, Not just your results will vary, but your results will probably. So it's like very uncertain. I'm not making any hard claim here, or Sasha's not making any hard claim about what will happen for you if you give this a shot. It will probably be different than his. But it might not be different, but probably will. Okay, so we're on to a step 2. How much more time? Oh, well, 10 more minutes. Step 2. What was step 1? Step 1. Okay. I made the rejected elements of myself legible through shadow integration. May 2021. So that's just about a full year ago. Okay. 11 months ago, as I'm reading this. Oh, step 2, where did you go? Oh, I saw internal family systems. Okay, here we go. Step 2, I learned introspective techniques that helped me interact with formerly rejected elements of myself. May, June 2021. Okay. I remember, I think on Twitter, I asked at one point, I was like, who are some good coaches who are like out there doing shadow work and IFS and stuff like that? And I think, I don't know if Sasha responded or somebody responded and tagged Mark. I wonder if it was Sasha. But I was surprised when I went to Mark's profile because it was like very small. Let me just check it real quick. I guess not. Maybe it's bigger than what I remember. Maybe it's grown since then. Almost 600. Yeah, it's not that small. Smaller than mine, though. Just kidding. I'm getting to take a lot less stock in size of Twitter followings as a marker of credibility. Anyway, so Mark, yeah, I'm familiar with him a little bit. But where is his, like, there's no website. He doesn't have a link to a website or anything. So, holy shit. Only 721 tweets. I'm pretty sure on my own Twitter, it's like 11,000. Jeez. Dude, how did you get so many followers off so few tweets? Teach me your ways. This is cool. This last sentence. I mean, it seems like Sasha is in a way becoming a person who can do this. That's what I'm trying to do. That's what I'm pretty much working on all the time, is cultivating these skills. Practicing them, understanding them, learning to teach them. That's what I pretty much spend all my time doing. That's kind of partly what I'm trying to do with these readings as well. Cool. Anyway, that's cool. Just a cool little anecdote. He wasn't selling anything, but the result was Sasha wanting to work with him. And that's a super interesting anecdote, in particular to me, because I've been spending so much time over the past year plus diving deep into my relationship to money and all the hang-ups and shame and fear and narratives and self-concepts that I have around money, or judgments that I have of other people that are related to money, stuff like that. And it's something that I'm paying attention to, like, among the people that I follow and among my friends. And selling is like such a notorious and common problem area that people have. Like, people really hate selling. Or it's like they just, okay, I'll speak for myself only. Like, despite my entire career being about selling, at the end of the day, I still have not been entirely comfortable with it. And I've had a lot of insecurities and fears and shame around selling. And I've had so much resistance to doing it. And I see that being talked about more and more. And that's, yeah, basically like it's one of the big problems that I'm exploring in my own life. So that I don't deal with it as much, but also so that hopefully I can help other people with that, since it's clearly such a problem for people. How much time is there? 5 minutes. Okay. So the weird corner of Twitter where everyone knows about this. I guess, yeah, that's my corner of Twitter as well. It does feel like everyone knows about this in those parts. Let's see, what is he actually linking to? Some Medium article. I don't know who wrote it. Okay, so he's explaining this idea of parts. Yeah, even fighting these thoughts, fighting them strengthens them. Blah, blah, blah. But instead, treat it as a part, and then connect with the part. Don't battle with it, get to know it. That's my entire, that's my Twitter handle, however you want to pronounce it. I pronounce it, I guess, Daemon Hugger. It's really a play on Demon Hugger, because rather than fighting your demons, it's about hugging them, showing compassion to them, connecting with them. And then sort of the flip side of that is, if you stop fighting your demons and you start hugging your demons, then that's when your daimon shows up. That's when your inner voice, your like true inner voice, rather than your sort of like traumatic voice shows up. Your daemon shows up, and you can hear it because you're not fighting your demons anymore. So that's what my whole friggin' Twitter name is about. That's where that comes from. Inner cooperation. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know that it's literally true in the sense like, yeah, materially true, literally true. It's not like you're gonna find little bunch of dudes inside of my head if you cut it open, but it's a way of conceptualizing what's going on inside. And that way of conceptualizing it allows you to work with it in a way that you wouldn't be able to if you conceptualized it in a different way. So this is where like more and more I'm realizing like the actual power and necessity of objectifying things in certain ways, and like the ways in which you choose to objectify things shapes how you interact with those things. So we're talking here about like internal mental and emotional phenomena, and there are a lot of ways that you could conceive of what that is. Like, you could just be straight up material about it and be like chemicals and brain synapses and all that shit. Or you could talk about, just thoughts and thought patterns, right? Or you could talk about demons or shadows or parts. And depending on which one you use, each of those is a something that you're each of those is like a type of object. So you're conceptualizing your internal world into a certain kind of object, and by doing so, then that shapes how you interact with and deal with those objects, right? So in this case, we're talking about sort of conceiving of or objectifying your internal world into a bunch of little people. And that's powerful because in a lot of ways, by conceiving them as people, you're avoiding objectifying them. You're making them into people with their own realities and their own feelings, and that ideally you would respect as other people, But again, not everyone treats people kindly, so you can see your parts as people and still think that you should kill them because people think that they should kill each other all the time. So it's not perfect, but it does work pretty well. But yeah, instead of identifying with or fighting, by conceiving of these internal things as parts, as their own individuals, as people, you no longer see yourself as them, nor do you see yourself as needing to fight with them, but rather connect with them and collaborate and get to know each other. Yeah. All right, my alarm went off, so I'll stop here, and this is the paragraph that I will pick up with next time. All right.